I remember that night like it was etched into the back of my eyelids, replaying every time I closed them on a stormy evening. It was late fall in the heart of Appalachia, the leaves long turned to mush underfoot, and the air thick with the promise of winter's bite. I'd been up in the hollow visiting my aunt, the last of my kin and still clinging to the old family homestead, tucked away in those forgotten valleys near Boone, North Carolina. She was getting on in years, her mind wandering more than her feet, and I'd driven up there to check on her, bring some groceries, and listen to a ramble about the old days. The visit had stretched longer than planned, what with her insisting on pulling out faded photo albums and recounting tales of my grandparents scratching a living from the rocky soil. By the time I said my goodbyes, the sky had darkened early, heavy clouds rolling in like a bad omen. Rain started as I pulled out onto the narrow county road, fat drops splattering the windshield of my beat-up Ford pickup, the one I'd inherited from my dad with its rusted fenders and temperamental heater. The drive back to my place in Asheville wasn't supposed to be a big deal, maybe 2 hours if the weather held. But Appalachia has a way of turning simple trips into ordeals. The roads here aren't like the interstates down in the flatlands. They're twisted veins carved into the mountains, full of blind curves and sheer drops where one wrong move sends you tumbling into the underbrush. I flipped on the wipers, their steady thump-ump a lonely rhythm against the growing roar of the storm. The radio was my only company, tuned to some AM station playing old bluegrass tunes interspersed with grainy weather reports. "Heavy rains moving through the Blue Ridge," the announcer drawled, his voice crackling like dry leaves. "Flash flood warnings in effect. Stay off the roads if you can." I chuckled to myself, bitter-like, 'cause what choice did I have? Work waited in the morning, fixing transmissions, and bills don't pay themselves. As the rain picked up, pounding the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers, visibility dropped to near nothing. My headlights cut feeble swaths through the deluge, illuminating twisted trunks of oaks and maples that crowded the roadside, their branches clawing at the sky. I eased off the gas, taking the curve slow, the truck's tires hissing on the slick asphalt. That's when I first noticed them, the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first they were just pinpricks, distant and harmless, like the eyes of some nocturnal critter caught in the beam. I figured it was another local, maybe heading home from a shift at the mill or a late supper at one of those roadside diners that doctor highways. No big deal. But as the minutes ticked by, those lights grew steadier, closer, their glow reflecting off the wet pavement behind me. I glanced back again, squinting against the glare. Couldn't make out the make or model, just two bright orbs hovering in the darkness, unwavering. I sped up a touch, testing, the engine groaning in protest as I pushed it to 40 on a road meant for 30. The lights matched me, inch for inch. Slowed down to 25, hugging the shoulder, same thing. They neither closed a gap to pass, nor fell away. It was like being tethered to an invisible line, pulled along by some unseen force. Unease prickled at the back of my neck, the kind you get when you're alone in the woods and feel eyes on you. I rolled down the window a crack, letting in the chill mist and the scent of wet earth, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. But all it did was amplify the storm's fury, the wind howling through the gaps like a mournful wail. The road narrowed further as I climbed higher into the mountains, the forest pressing in on both sides. These parts of Appalachia are old, older than the settlements that tried to tame them. Folks around here talk about the land remembering things, feuds, floods, lives lost in mining accidents or to the bottle. My aunt had spun yarns about phantom travelers on these roads, souls who couldn't find their way home after wrecks in a fog. I'd always dismissed it as old-time superstition, the kind brewed from too much moonshine and isolation. But now, with those lights dogging my every move, doubt crept in. I tried the radio again, twisting the dial for something to drown out my thoughts. but static swallowed the stations, broken only by faint, garbled voices that sounded almost human, almost pleading. Hours seemed to stretch, though my watch said it only been 40 minutes. No turnoffs, no side roads, just an endless ribbon of blacktop snaking through the trees. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles whitening, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a cop tailing me for a busted taillight, but no sirens, no flashes, or kids playing a prank, souped-up truck with fog lights. Didn't feel right. The glare in the mirror was relentless, turning the cab into a play of shadows that danced unnervingly. I adjusted the mirror, tilting it down. That only made the light seem brighter, more insistent. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold seeping in, and my heart thumped an erratic beat against my ribs. Then the shapes started. At first I blamed the rain, the way it distorted everything into smears and blurs. But there, in the mist-shrouded edges of the forest, I swore I saw movement. Tall, lanky figures slipping between the trunks, keeping pace with the truck. Humanoid, but not quite right. Their limbs too long, their gait too jerky, like folks who'd forgotten how to walk proper after years in the wild. Pharaoh people, that's what the locals whispered about in hushed tones at Cabarro. Hermits gone mad from solitude, or worse, descendants of those who'd vanished into the hills generations ago, surviving on whatever the mountains provided. I'd heard stories, hikers gone missing, camps raided in the night, eerie howls echoing through the valleys. Rational me said it was deer or branches swaying in the wind, but the lights behind me felt like a herder, driving me towards something unseen. I pushed the trek harder, the engine whining as I took a curve too fast, gravel crunching under the tires. The lights stayed glued, unyielding. Panic bubbled up hot and sharp, making my breath come in short gasps. What if they weren't lights at all? What if it was something else, some echo from the past replaying on this cursed stretch? My mind flashed to a story my dad told once about a great uncle who'd driven these roads back in the 50s. He'd spun a tale of being followed by a ghost car after a mine collapse that buried 20 men alive. The dead don't like being left behind, Dad had said, his eyes distant. I shook the thought away, focusing on the road ahead, but the shapes in the woods multiplied, darting closer, their forms resolving into pale faces peering from the undergrowth, eyes reflecting my headlights like animals. The rain intensified, sheets of it slamming against the glass. The white was struggling to keep up. Thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the truck, and lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the landscape in stark white flashes. In one such burst, I saw them, clear as day, figures standing at the tree line, ragged clothes hanging off skeletal frames, arms outstretched as if beckoning. I yelled, swerving slightly, the truck fishtailing on the wet road. Rain regained control. I floored it, pushing 60 now, reckless in my desperation. The lights behind accelerated too, their beam piercing the cab, casting my shadow long and distorted on the dashboard. I could almost feel a presence, cold fingers brushing the nape of my neck, wispins mingling with the static on the radio. Names, dates, fragments of sorrow. Miles blurred together, the storm a relentless companion. My phone had no signal out here. Appalachia's dead zones are legendary, and the gas gauge dipped worryingly low. Exhaustion tugged at me, but fear kept me wide, eyes flicking between the road and the mirror. The shapes in the woods seemed to multiply with each lightning strike, a silent procession mirroring my path. Were they real? Hallucinations from fatigue and fright? I didn't know, didn't want to know. All I craved was escape, a glimpse of civilization to shatter this nightmare. Finally, as the first gray hints of dawn smudged the horizon, the rain slackened to a drizzle. The road widened, descending into a valley, where a lone gas station squatted by the roadside, its neon sign flickering like a beacon. I pulled in sharp, tire screeching, heart hammering as if it burst from my chest. Throwing the truck into park, I glanced back. No lights, just empty roads stretching into the fading dark. I sat there a moment, breathing ragged, before stumbling out into the damp air. The attendant was an old fella, probably in his 70s, with skin like cracked leather and eyes sunken deep from years of hard living. He ambled out from the shop, wiping his hands on a greasy rag, peering at me curiously. "Rough night?" he asked, voice gravelly from cigarettes. I nodded, words tumbling out in a rush, told him about the lights, the pursuit, the shapes in the woods. He listened quiet-like, chewing on a toothpick, then shook his head slow. "Ain't the first I've heard of such. These roads, they hold on to things. Lost souls from the old wrecks, folks say. Storms bring 'em out, looking for company." He glanced at the horizon, where the sun was peeking through the clouds. "Best you get on home now. Daylight chases 'em away, but they always come back." I filled up the tank, bought a coffee that tasted like burnt tar, and drove to last leg home in silence. That was 3 years ago, and I've rerouted my trip since, sticking to the main highways, even if it adds hour. But on rainy nights, when the wind howls through the eaves of my house, I find myself staring out the window, half expecting to see those headlights cresting the hill. And in my dreams, they close in, the shapes emerging from the mist, whispering invitations to join them on the endless road. I wake sweating, wondering if one day I'll answer. The mountains remember, after all, and some memories don't let go. I'd been trucking these Appalachian routes for now on 15 years, hauling everything from lumber to groceries through the twisting veins of the Blue Ridge. It's a solitary life, one that suits a man like me. Divorced, no kids, just a hum of a diesel engine and an endless ribbon of highway to keep me company. But that man, back in the spring of 18, the mountains turned on me in a way I'll never shake. The rain had started around dusk as I left the depot in Knoxville, fat drops that quickly turned into a biblical downpour, hammering the cab like he was trying to break in. My rig, an old Peterbilt with over 500,000 miles on her, groaned under the load of canned goods bound for a little speck of a town called Harlan, Kentucky, nestled deep in the valleys where the coal mines had long since gone quiet. The wipers slapped back and forth, smearing the water more than clearing it, and I had to lean forward, squinting through the windshield as the headlights pierced the gloom. Visibility was shot. The road ahead dissolved into a hazy blur, broken only by the occasional flicker of lightning that lit up the ridges like God's own flashlight. Thunder rolled through the hollows, echoing off the cliffs, making the whole world feel alive and angry. I sipped black coffee from a thermos, better and lukewarm, trying to stay sharp. Nights like this, you learn to respect the mountains. They don't care about schedules or deadlines. One slick curve, one moment of distraction, and you're over the edge, tumbling into the underbrush where no one might find you for days. I'd taken this route 100 times, preferring the back highways to the interstates. Less traffic, more peace, or so I thought. But as the storm worsened, the isolation started to weigh on me. No other vehicles in sight, just an endless forest pressing in on both sides, trees swaying like they were whispering secrets to each other. My CB radio crackled with static, the voices of other truckers fading in and out, talking about washouts and delays further north. I keyed the mic once or twice, but got no response. Signal must have been swallowed by the weather. Alone with my thoughts, I reminisced about better days. Weekends fishing in the streams with my old man before the cancer took him, or the early years of my marriage when Sarah and I would drive these same roads just for the hell of it, windows down, laughing at nothing. Those memories felt distant now, faded like the yellow lines on the pavement. As I crested a hill, the overpass came into view, a relic from the old mining days, overgrown with kudzu and ivitted drape like funeral shrouds. It spanned a dry creek bed below, though with this rain, it'd be a raging torrent by morning. The structure looked forgotten, concrete cracked and stained, graffiti from kids long gone scrawled on the pillars. I eased off the gas, the truck's brakes hissing softly as I approached. That's when I first heard it, a low murmur, barely audible over the rain's roar. At first I pegged it for the wind whistling through the cab seals, or maybe the tires humming on the wet asphalt. But it persisted, growing clearer, like voices just out of reach. I shook my head, chalking it up to fatigue. Long hauls play tricks on you. The mind wanders, conjures phantoms from the shadows. Under the overpass, the noise amplified, the rain echoing off the underside like a drumbeat in a cavern. The truck's headlights cast long shadows on the walls, illuminating patches of moss and dripping water. The murmur turned to whispers, distinct now, slithering into the cab. I rolled the window down a hair, despite the chill blasting in with sprays of mist, curiosity overriding common sense. The voices drifted clearer, fragmented words, pleas like help, cold, fallen, names I didn't know, Mary, Jacob, little Ellie, spoken in tones of desperation, overlapping like a chorus at a dam. My skin prickled, hair standing on end. Was it kids messing around up top? Vandals with a sick sense of humor? But no, the overpass was abandoned, no access roads nearby, and who the hell would be out in this deluge? I glanced up through the windshield, but the angle was wrong. All I saw was the darkening belly of the bridge, water cascading in rivulets. The engine sputtered then, a cough that made the whole rig shudder. The dash lights flickered, dimming like something was sucking the power right out. "Come on, girl," I muttered, pumping accelerator, but she hesitated, RPM needle dipping erratically. Panic flickered in my chest, stranded here in the middle of nowhere, with sales service as spotty as a Dalmatian. I checked the mirrors, half expecting to see another vehicle, but there was nothing, just the endless night stretching behind. That's when I caught it in the rear view, pale smudges against the shadows above, faces peering down from the overpass's edge. Not clear, mind you, blurred by the rain and distance, but unmistakable. Hollow eyes, mouths open in silent cries, hands dangling over the side, fingers played as if reaching for the truck below. My heart slammed against my ribs, breath catching in my throat. I floored it, the engine roaring back to life with a reluctant growl, tires spinning on the slick surface before catching traction. The rig lurched forward, bursting out from under the overpass into the open storm. The whisper swelled for a moment, coalescing into one chilling sentence that cut through the noise. "Join us in the fall." Then, as quickly as they'd come, they faded, swallowed by the wind and rain. I didn't look back, kept my eyes glued to the road, hands trembling on the wheel. Miles ticked by in a blur, the storm raging on, lightning cracking the sky and thunder shaking the cab. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a radio frequency bleeding through, or exhaustion hallucinating a lot. But those faces, they felt too real, too sorrowful. Eventually, the rain eased as I descended into a broader valley, and I spotted the glow of a diner ahead, one of those all-night joints catering to truckers and insomniacs. I pulled into the gravel lot, the rig hissing to a stop, and sat there a minute, collecting myself. The neon sign buzzed open, casting a red hue over the puddles. Inside, the place was sparse, a few booths for mica counters scarred from years of use, the smell of grease and coffee thick in the air. A waitress, middle-aged with tired eyes, poured me a mug without asking. "Rough one out there?" she said, nodding toward the window where rain still pattered. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warmth, and after a sip I spilled it. Told her about the whispers, the engine trouble, those reaching hands. She listened, face impassive, then glanced at the cook behind the counter, an older gent with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve. He ambled over, wiping his hands on his apron. "That Overpass," he said, voice low like he was sharing a secret. "It's got history. Back in '64, A church bus full of folks heading to a revival skidded off in a storm just like this, plunged right over the edge. 20 souls gone, men, women, kids. They say on rainy nights you can hear 'em still, calling out as they fail. The waitress crossed herself subtly. Some drivers avoid it altogether, take the long way around, better safe than sorry. I finished my coffee, paid up, and headed back to the truck, their words echoing in my head. The rest of the haul passed uneventful, but sleep didn't come easy that night in Harlan, nor the nights after. I've rerouted my runs since, sticking to brighter paths, but the mountains don't forget. On stormy evenings, when the wind picks up and rain taps the roof, I hear those whispers again, faint at first, growing clearer. Names, please, that final invitation. I wonder if one day they'll pull me in, make me part of their eternal fall. The road calls after all, and some calls you can't ignore forever. But let me back up a bit, because the dread didn't start right at the overpass. It built slow, like fog creeping up a hillside. Earlier that evening, as I loaded the trailer in Knoxville, the depot manager had warned me about the weather. "Gonna be a soaker," he'd said, clapping me on the back. "Watch them hollows, they flood quick." I shrugged it off, too seasoned to fret over a little rain. But as I hit the highway, the first doubts crept in. The sky darkened prematurely, clouds boiling like a witch's cauldron, and the temperature dropped sharp, fogging the edges of the windows. I cranked the heater, but it only blew lukewarm air, leaving me chilled to the bone. The road wound through forgotten towns, street lights few and far between, houses hunkered down against the storm with curtains drawn tight. I passed an old church, its steeple silhouetted against a lightning flash, and for a moment I thought I saw figures in the graveyard, standing motionless in the rain. Blinked, and they were gone. Probably just headstones, my mind playing tricks. But it set me on edge, that uneasy feeling of being watched from the dark. The radio, when it worked, spat out warnings: severe thunderstorm watch for eastern Tennessee and western Kentucky, high winds, heavy rain, possible hail. I switched to music, some old country station playing Johnny Cash, his voice gravelly and fittin' for the night. As I climbed higher, the forest thickened, ancient hardwoods that had seen centuries of storms. Branches scraped the top of the cab now and then, like fingers testing for weakness. The whisper started subtle here, before to Overpass, a faint susurrus beneath the engine's rumble. I adjusted the vents, thinking it was air whistling through, but it persisted, rising and falling with the wind gusts. Names again, or what sounded like them, interwoven with sobs. I told myself it was the storm, the way sound travels funny in these mountains, bouncing off ridges and valleys. But deep down, a knot formed in my gut, the kind you get when you're alone in the woods and hear footsteps that aren't your own. Approaching the overpass, the road dipped, water pooling in the ruts, forcing me to slow even more. The structure loomed larger now, a concrete behemoth swallowed by vines, its underbelly dripping like a leaky cave. Lightning illuminated graffiti, names, dates, crude drawings that looked like screams frozen in paint. The whispers grew insistent as I rolled beneath, the cab filling with their urgency. "Please, don't leave," falling. I cracked a window, rain spraying my face, and leaned out, straining to listen. That's when the engine faltered, lights dim into a glow, instruments flickering like a bad connection. The truck coasted, momentum carrying me forward, but the power drain felt unnatural, like invisible hands siphoning the life from her. In the rearview, those faces materialized gradual, first as pale ovals in the gloom, then resolving into features, wide eyes, miles agape, hands plastered by rain that wasn't falling under there. One face, a woman's maybe, locked eyes with mine in the mirror, her expression one of endless sorrow. My breath fogged the glass, heart pounding so loud it drowned the rain for a second. I slammed the accelerator, willing the engine to catch, and it did with a roar that shook the cab. Bursting out the other side, the whispers peaked, "Join us in the fall," then dissipated, leaving only the storm's howl. The diner conversation replayed in my mind for weeks after, the cook's tale of a bus wreck digging roots into my thoughts. I'd looked it up later on a library computer in Harlan, yellow newspaper clippings from '64, photos of a mangled wreckage at the creek bottom, survivors' accounts of screams as it plummeted. No wonder the place felt haunted. Grief like that doesn't dissipate easy in these hills. It lingers, seeps into the soil, waits for nights like that to resurface. I've thought about quitting trucking, finding work closer to home, but the road's in my blood. Still, I avoid that stretch, take detours that add hours but spare my sanity. Yet on rainy nights, alone in my apartment with the TV drone in the field of silence, the whispers return. Not loud, not clear, but there. Names, pleas, that pull to join them. I wonder if one day, when the storm's just right, I'll stop fighting and reach back. The mountains hold their secrets tight after all, and some are meant to drag you down with them. I'd worked the late shift at the sawmill in Elkins, West Virginia, the kind that leaves your bones aching and your clothes dusted with sawdust that clings no matter how hard you brush it off. It was mid-October, when the days shorten and the chill seeps into everything, turning the air crisp and unforgiving. The rain had started around quitting time. A steady drizzle that swelled into a torrent by the time I climbed into my old Chevy sedan, its engine coughing to life like an old smoker. Home was about 40 miles away, down those narrow back roads that snake through the Monongahela National Forest, roads where the cliffs hug one side and the dense woods press in on the other, swallowing any light that dares venture in. I gripped the wheel, the tires whispering on the wet pavement, hydroplaning just enough on the curves to make my stomach twist. Folks around him know better than the speed in weather like this. One wrong turn and you're over the edge, lost to the ravines below where the undergrowth hides secrets best left buried. The radio was my only companion, tuned to a local station playing faded country tunes, but static chewed at the edges, the signal weakening as I climbed higher into the hills. Lightning flickered distant, illuminating the treetops like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. Thunder followed, low and rumbling, vibrating through the car. I thought about my wife, Jenny, waiting at home with a pot of stew on the stove. She'd worry if I was late, especially on nights like this. We'd been married 10 years, scraping by in a double-wide on the outskirts of town, dreaming of something better, but knowing these mountains don't let go easy. My mind wandered to the old stories she'd tell from her grandma, tales of folks vanishing on these roads, swallowed by the fog of the forest. I'd always laughed them off, called them hillbilly superstitions, but out here alone, with the rain pounding relentless, doubt has a way of creeping in. The road twisted sharper now, the kind of bends where you lean into 'em, praying no deer dots out from the brush. My headlights cut through the haze, reflecting off puddles that looked like black mirrors. That's when I saw it, around a particularly nasty curve, pull off to the shoulder, an old car, rusted and weathered, its body sagging like it'd been there for years. The doors hung ajar, swinging slightly in the wind, and a faint glow emanated from the interior, dim and yellowish like a dying bulb. Steam rose from the hood, curling into the rain, as if the engine had just overheated moments ago. No one in sight, no flares or hazards flashing, just this relic abandoned in the storm. My first thought was accident. Maybe someone spun out, hit a slick patch, and wandered off for help. Out here, sales service is a joke, spotty at best, so folks rely on passers-by. I slowed, debating. Part of me wanted to keep driving, Jenny's stew calling, the warmth of home. But the cold in these parts is clear. You stop, you help, because next time it could be you. I eased the Chevy to a crawl, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder, and peered through the windshield. The rain blurred everything, turning the scene into a watery smear. The car looked like something from the 60s or 70s, boxy and American-made, paint chipped away to reveal patches of corrosion. The license plate was obscured by mud and moss. Moss? That struck me odd. How long does it take for moss to grow on metal like that? I honked once, a sharp beat to cut through the downpour, expecting someone to emerge from the woods away from inside. Nothing. Just the steady patter of rain and the distant roll of thunder. Unease prickling at my skin, the isolation amplifying every sound, the whipest thunk, my own breathing. I rolled down the window a crack, cold mist spraying in, and called out, "Hey, you all right? Need a hand?" Silence at first, then a rustle from the tree line, subtle like leaves shifting. A strain my eyes, headlights casting long shadows into the forest. That's when the figure appeared, emerging from the underbrush, drenched and shambling, clothes hanging off them like rags. They moved slow, deliberate, arms outstretched in front, like they were feeling their way through the dark. Rain plastered their hair, obscuring the face, but something about the gait felt wrong, jerky, unbalanced, like someone half frozen or hurt bad. My heart picked up, a mix of concern and caution. "You okay?" I shouted again, louder this time. No response, just that steady approach toward my car. I hunched again, longer, but they didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge, just kept coming, steps splashing in the puddles. Panic started to bubble then, slow at first, like the steam from that hood. I inched the car forward, keeping pace but not committing, my mind racing through scenarios. Drunk? Injured? Or worse, one of those pharaoh types the old-timers whispered about, folks gone wild in the woods, living off scraps and avoiding civilization. Jenny's grandma had stories of him too, descendants of moonshiners or Civil War deserters, eyes gone mad from too much solitude. Rational me pushed it down, probably just a stranded motorist, disoriented from the cold. But as they drew closer, maybe 20 feet now, details sharpened in the headlights. Clothes outdated, faded denim and a flannel shirt torn at the seams, soaked through but not matted. And the plate, I caught a glimpse as my beam swept over it, an old West Virginia tag, the kind they stopped issuing decades ago, encrusted with lichen and dirt. How the hell was steam rising if this thing had been rusting here for years? The figure was at my bumper now, arms still out, fingers splayed like they meant to grab hold. I locked the doors, a click that echoed too loud in the cab. Their face lifted, then shadows parting just enough. Pale skin, gaunt cheeks, but the eyes, hollow, unblinking, staring right through the glass into mine. No plea for help, no desperation, just an empty gaze, like looking into a well that goes on forever. My breath caught, skin crawling as if ants marched up my spine. This wasn't right. No one stands in a storm like that, unmoving, unresponsive. I hit the gas, tires spinning wild on the wet gravel, the car fishtailing before catching asphalt. In the rear view, the figure stood there, arms dropping slow, and behind them, more shapes materialized from the trees, tall, ragged forms circling the abandoned car, their movements mirroring the first. I didn't look back after that, eyes fixed on the road, heart slamming like a jackhammer. The curves blurred together, rain lashing harder, as if the storm chased me. Miles stretched, endless in the dark, my mind replaying those eyes that played. Finally, the lights of town appeared. Elkin's outskirts, a gas station glowing like salvation. I pulled in, shaken, and stumbled inside to the payphone, dialing the sheriff's office. Deputy Harlan answered, voice gruff and familiar. I spilt it all, words tumbling, the car, the figure, the others. He listened quiet, then sighed deep. "That bend on County 219? Yes, son. That wreck's been there since '72. Family of 4 skidded off in a nor'easter, plunged into the holler. Never found all the bodies. Folks say on rainy nights they come back, waiting for a ride out of there." I hung up, numb, and drove home slow. Jenny's lights welcoming, but not enough to warm the chill. That was 5 years ago, and I've taken the long way ever since, avoiding those curves when the sky darkens. But on stormy drives, when the wipers can't keep up and the forest whispers, I swear I see that car in the mirror, lights flickering, figures waiting, and I wonder if one day I'll stop, drawn by those eyes, joining whatever waits in the rain. Let me tell you more, because the fear didn't hit all at once. It built like the storm itself, gathering force over hours. That day at the mill had been grueling. We were short-staffed, machines jamming from the damp, and by shift's end I was bone-tired, muscles screaming. I remember clocking out, waving to old man Perkins, who mothered about the weather turning foul. "Drive safe, boy," he'd said, his eyes squinting at the clouds. I nodded, not thinking much of it, and hit the road with a thermos of coffee that tasted like tar but kept me alert. The first few miles were uneventful, the rain a gentle patter, lulling almost. I thought about dinner, maybe watching the game with Jenny, our dog curled at our feet. But as the elevation rose, the storm intensified. Wind buffeted in the car like invisible hands pushing. Fog rolled in from the valleys, clinging to the cliffs, reducing my world to a 10-foot cone of light. That's when the isolation really set in, the knowledge that if something happened, help was hours away. No houses, no traffic, just me and the mountains, ancient and indifferent. Spotting the car wasn't immediate. It crept into view around the bend, a shape materializing from the haze. I braked gentle, the sedan sliding a bit, heart jumping. Up close, details unnerved, tires flat and rotted, weeds poking through the wheel wells, yet that steam rising fresh. I sat there idling, engine humming, debating my next move. Part of me recalled a buddy's story from years back, stopped for a similar sight, found nothing but echoes. But duty won out. I edged closer, hunkering again. The figure's emergence was slow, deliberate, a crackle of branches, then a silhouette against the trees. They didn't hurry, didn't wave frantic, just shambled out, water streaming off of them. I called out once more, voice cracking a bit, but the rain drowned it. As they neared, the unnaturalness sharpened, the limp, the rigid posture, arms not swinging but extended rigid. Panic whispered then, urging me a go, but curiosity held me, that damn hillbilly helpfulness. The plate confirmed it, 72 tag, expired forever, moss thick as carpet. And those eyes, locking on mine, no blink, no life, just voids pulling me in. I gasped it hard, Rearview filling with more figures, 3, 4, circling silent, watching me flee. At the sheriff's, Harlan's words lingered, tales of a family, parents, 2 kids, vanished in a drop. Search parties found the car, but only fragments below. Some say they wander, seeking escape. Nights now, rain tapping a window, I lie awake, hearing tires on gravel, seeing those eyes in dreams. The curves call, beckoning, and I fear answering. The forest remembers, and some memories hunger. I'd always had a love-hate relationship with these Appalachian backroads, the kind that wind through the hills like forgotten promises, offering solitude but demanding respect in return. It was early summer, the air heavy with the scent of blooming rhododendrons and the distant rumble of thunder that promised a storm. I'd been in Pittsburgh for a conference, something about environmental regulations for the coal industry remnants. And now I was heading back to my cabin near Hazard, Kentucky, a place I'd bought cheap after my divorce, figuring the quiet would help me sort through the wreckage of my life. My SUV, a reliable Ford Explorer I'd babied for years, hummed along the pavement, tires hissing on the wet asphalt as the rain started in earnest. The sky had darkened prematurely, clouds boiling over the ridges like smoke from an old steel. Anna flipped on the wipers, their rhythmic swipe a comforting counterpoint to the growing isolation. Out here, cell service fades like a bad memory, and the radio stations dissolve into static, leaving you alone with your thoughts. Mine wandered to my ex, Sarah, and how she'd hated these drives, calling the mountains claustrophobic. Maybe she was right. They had a way of closing in, especially when the weather turns. The route took me through one of those old mining tunnels, relics from the boom days when companies blasted through the rock to haul out black gold. This one, locals called it the Black Vein Pass, though the signs just said tunnel ahead, reduce speed. It was built in the 40s, converted to a roadway after the mines played out, but it still carried the weight of history. Cracked concrete walls etched with graffiti and water stains, ceilings weeping from unseen fissures. I'd driven it plenty, but never in a deluge like this. The rain hammered down as I approached the entrance, turning the road into a slick black mirror reflecting my headlights. Water cascaded over the mouth like a curtain, and I eased off the gas, the SUV's engine growling low as I plunged in. The transition was abrupt. Outside noise muffled to a distant roar, replaced by the echo of tires on uneven pavement and a drip-drip of seepage from above. The dashboard glow cast a greenish hue on everything, my only light besides the high beams piss in the gloom ahead. It felt like entering a tomb, the air cooler, thicker, laced with the musty tang of damp earth and something metallic like rust or old blood. Halfway through, maybe a quarter-mile in, though distances stretch in the dark, the engine coughed. Just a stutter at first, the RPM needle dipping erratic. Then it died outright. The SUV coasted to a silent stop. The headlights flickered once, twice, then hail, but the sudden quiet was deafening, broken only by the distant thunder rumbling through the rock and the steady plink of water hitting puddles. I turned the key, nothing, not even a click. "Come on," I muttered, trying again, the ignition silent as a grave. Panic flickered at the edges, but I pushed it down. Probably just vapor lock or a wet distributor. Happens in storms. I fumbled from a phone, the screen glowing mockingly with no service. Of course, out here you're truly cut off, relying on luck or a kindness of strangers who might never pass. I sat there a moment, listening to the drips, each one echoing like a countdown. The tunnel stretched maybe another quarter-mile ahead, curving slightly, the exit a faint gray smudge in the distance. Behind, the entrance was a mirror of rain-smeared light, too far to walk without getting soaked, but staying put felt wrong, like inviting trouble. That's when the shape stirred. At first I thought it was my eyes adjusting, shadows playing tricks in the beam's periphery. But no, elongated figures, detaching from the walls with a deliberate slowness, like men rising from a long sleep. They weren't clear, just silhouettes against a concrete, tall and hunched, moving with that labored gait of folks who spent lives bent under low ceilings. Whispers bounced off the walls then, muffled cries that could have been wind through cracks, but the words fragmented, down, trapped, air. My skin prickled, hair standing on end. I told myself it was the acoustics, the storm playing ventriloquist, but the shapes edged closer, skirting the edge. One paused, outlined in the beam, an outline of a helmet, maybe, or a hard hat long outdated, shoulders slumped under invisible weight. Memories flooded back, unbidden, stories from a grandpa, a miner in these hills before the unions broke. He'd talked late nights by the fire, voice low, about collapses that buried men alive, their knocks echoing through the shafts for days until silence claimed them. "The mountain takes what it wants," he'd say, eyes distant. I'd dismissed it as old man's tales, but now, stranded in this vein of stone, doubt crept in like the chill. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove box, its beam cutting a shaky path into the dark. Stepping out felt like a mistake the moment my boots hit the puddle-strewn ground, the air thick, oppressive, carrying that metallic bite stronger now, mingled with coal dust that shouldn't be there. The SUV's door creaked shut behind me, echoing down the tunnel like a signal. I swept the light ahead, catching glints off wet walls, but the shapes retreated just out of reach, melting into alcoves or behind support beams rusted with age. Footsteps splashed then, faint at first, circling from the sides, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing in thought. "Hello?" I called, voice bouncing back, distorted, mocking. No answer, just more whispers, clearer now. Names, maybe, or please. "Jimmy, can't breathe. Help." My heart thudded, breath coming short. Was it echoes of my own voice, hallucinations from carbon monoxide seeping through cracks? But the footsteps grew bolder, splashing closer, and in the beam's edge I caught a glimpse. A hand, pale and grimy, fingers callous like a laborer's, reaching from shadow. Adrenaline surged, hot and sharp, propelling me back toward the door. One shadow lunged then, not aggressive but insistent, a form materializing just enough to smear a handprint on the driver's window. 5 fingers, smeared with what looked like soot, pressing against the glass before vanishing into nothing. I yanked the door open, slamming it behind me, locking it out of habit, though what good would that do? The whisper swelled, surrounding the SUV, a chorus of muffled despair bouncing off the ceiling. I twisted the key again, desperate. Nothing. Again, a cough. Then the engine roared to life, headlights flaring bright as if startled awake. I didn't question it, just floor at the accelerator, tires spinning on the wet floor before catching, the SUV lurching forward. The shapes fell away in the rearview, dissolving into the dark as I sped toward the exit. Rain welcomed me like salvation, pouring down as I burst out the other end. The storm's roar a relief after the tunnel's stifled dread. I pulled over at the next turnout, a gravel patch overlooking a foggy valley, hands shaking on the wheel. An old pickup was there, an elderly driver leaning against it, smoking a cigarette under a poncho. He nodded as I approached, face weathered like the rock faces around us. "Trouble in the tunnel?" he asked, voice gravelly from years of dust. I told him, the stall, the shadows, the whispers. He listened quiet, exhaling smoke that curled into the mist. "Them tunnels hold grudges from the old days. Collapse back in '53 took 30 men. Knocked for help they did, but the company sealed him in, said it was too risky. Folks hear him still, on stormy nights when the water rises." He flicked the blood away. "Best not linger. Mountains don't forget." That was 2 years ago, and I've avoided those paths since, taking longer routes even if it means hours added. But rainy nights find me restless, staring at the ceiling, hearing drips that aren't there, feeling shadows stir in the corners of my mind. I wonder if they're still knocking, waiting for someone to answer, and if one day, when the storm calls, I'll find myself back in that dark mouth, listening. Let me go back, because the unease didn't start in the tunnel. It built over the drive layer by layer, like sediment in these ancient hills. Leaving Pittsburgh, the weather reports had warned of flash floods in the Alleghenies, but I pushed on, stubborn, figuring my SUV could handle it. The first drops hit as I crossed into West Virginia, sporadic at first, then steady, turning the interstate into a haze of taillights. I veered off onto the secondary roads near Morgantown, preferring the quiet, despite Sarah's voice in my head calling it foolhardy. The forest thickened, hemlocks and oaks crowding the shoulders, their branches arching overhead like a canopy trap in the gloom. Lightning cracked occasionally, illuminating distant peaks, and thunder followed, shaking the vehicle. I sipped coffee from a travel mug, bitter and cooling, trying to focus on the road, but my thoughts drifting to the conference. Talks of abandoned mines leaching toxins, ghosts of industry haunting the water tables. Ironic now. As the tunnel neared, signs warned low clearance, trucks prohibited, but my SUV fit fine. The entrance loomed, framed by overgrown vines, water sheeting down like tears from the mountain's eyes. Inside, the temperature dropped sharp, fog in the edges of the windows, and the air grew heavy, pressing on my chest. The drips started immediate, plinking into pools that reflected the headlights like scattered coins. I drove slow, mindful of the curve, but the engine stutter caught me off guard. A hiccup, then silence. Coasting to a stop, the quiet enveloped me, amplified by the stone. I checked the gauges, fuel fine, battery strong, but nothing responded. The whispers came subtle then, a murmur beneath the thunder, like conversations from another room. Stepping out, flashlight in hand, the chill bit through my jacket, the metallic scent stronger, evoking memories of visiting Grandpa's old tool shed, rusted picks and lanterns from his mining days. The beam swept, catching graffiti. Jimmy was here, 52. God save us. And then the shapes, stirring like awakened memories. Footsteps echoed, circling, and the handprint. It lingered on the glass even after I escaped, fading only as I wiped it with a rag at home. But the smudge felt like coal dust under my nails. The old driver's words echo still, a warning I heed but can't escape. Shadows wait in my dreams, knocking softly, and I fear the day the engine stalls again, drawing me back to listen forever. The mountains hold their dead close, after all, and some grudges run deep as the veins they mine. I'd been on the road for what felt like forever that night, fleeing the concrete jungle of Charlotte where my life had unraveled like a frayed rope. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend now, had packed her bags after one too many arguments, leaving me with an empty apartment and a heart full of regrets. I figured the mountains would heal me, the way they always seemed to in those old folk songs my grandpa used to hum. Appalachia has that pull, you know? The quiet hollers and misty ridges promise solitude, a place to lick your wounds without the world watching. So I threw some clothes in the back of my Jeep, topped off the tank, and headed north into rural Tennessee, aiming for a cheap cabin rental near the Smokies. The rain started about an hour out, light at first, tapping the roof like impatient fingers, but it built quick, turning in the sheets that lashed the windshield and blurred the world beyond. The switchbacks were treacherous, narrow ribbons of asphalt hugging the hillsides, fog rolling in thick from the valleys below, swallowing my headlights whole. I gripped the wheel tighter, the tires hissing on the wet pavement, hydroplaning just enough to remind me how fragile control really is out here. Loneliness settled in heavy as the miles ticked by. The radio had gone dead miles back, no signal in these deep cuts through the rock, just static crackling like distant fire. I tried my phone's playlist, but the battery was dying and the charge cord was buried somewhere in the mess behind me. So it was just me, the storm symphony, and my thoughts churning like the creek swelling beside the road. I thought about her, Emily, how her laugh used to fill the room, how we planned trips like this together before things soured. Now it was just echoes of what-ifs, amplified by the isolation. These roads aren't forgiving. They wind through forgotten places where towns are little more than clusters of weathered houses, lights winking out early against the dark. No street lamps, no passing cars, just the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the treetops, branches twisted like veins against the sky. Thunder followed, low and grumbling, vibrating through the Jeep's frame. I remember wishing for a diner or a gas station, some sign of life. But out here, you're on your own timetable, the mountains dictating the pace. That's when I saw him, the hitchhiker. He materialized out of the fog like an apparition, standing motionless on the shoulder, thumb extended in that universal plea. His hood was pulled low, rain cascading off it in rivulets, and he didn't flinch as my headlights swept over him. Just stood there, drenched to the bone, as if the downpour was nothing. Compassion kicked in before caution could argue. Folks in these parts still pick up strays, a remnant of the old ways when helping your neighbor meant survival. I slowed, pulling over onto the gravel edge, tires crunching softly. The wiper slapped back and forth, clearing just enough to see him approach. I unlocked the passenger door, yelling over the roar, "Hop in, where you headed?" He climbed in without a word, water pooling at his feet on the floor mat, bringing with him a chill that seeped into the cab. An old scent followed, wet soil mixed with something deeper, like decay from fallen leaves or an unearthed grave. It wasn't overpowering, but it lingered, clinging to the air like fog on glass. I pulled back onto the road, glancing over. His face was hidden in shadow, hood still up, hands folded in his lap like he was praying. "Bad night to be out," I said, trying to fill the silence. You all right? Need a hospital or something?" He didn't respond, just lifted a hand, pale, wrinkled skin, and pointed straight ahead, down the twisting blacktop. Unease prickled at the back of my neck, but I chalked it up to the storm, the breakup jitters. Maybe he was mute or shell-shocked from the cold. We drove on in that uneasy quiet, the radio still dead, only the rain's relentless drum and the occasional thunderclap breaking through. I kept stealing glances in the rearview mirror, catching snippets of his profile. Pale skin stretched tight over sharp bones, eyes fixed unblinking on the road ahead, reflecting the dashboard glow like polished stones. He didn't shift, didn't cough or clear his throat, just sat there, statue still as the miles unwound. The fog thickened, forcing me to slow to a crawl, the Jeep's engine humming low. That's when he started muttering, soft at first, words slurring into the storm's noise. I leaned closer, straining. The flood took us all, water rising, incoherent fragments like snippets from a dream. My pulse quickened. Was he drunk, high, or just a old Tommy lost in memory? Appalachia had as plenty it owes, folks scarred by hard lives, floods and mine collapses etching lines deeper than age. I asked, "What flood? You mean back in the day?" No answer, just more murmurs. Bridge gave way. Cold, so cold. The scent grew stronger, that earthy decay filling the cab, making my stomach turn. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the interior for a split second, his eyes wide and vacant, staring not at the road but through it, as if seeing something I couldn't. Unease built to a simmer, my hands slick on the wheel. I considered pulling over, asking him to get out. But where? No towns for miles, just endless forest pressing in, trees swaying like silent witnesses. Suddenly, the Jeep hit a deep puddle, hidden in the fog, a washout from the rain, and swerved hard, tires losing grip on the slick surface. I fought the wheel, heart slamming, the vehicle fishtailing toward the guardrail. Time stretched to drop off beyond a black void waiting to swallow us. I managed to straighten out, brakes squealing, coming to a shuddering stop on the shoulder. Breath ragged, I turned to check on him. "You okay?" But the seat was empty, door still locked, window up, no sign he'd ever been there, except a wet imprint on the upholstery, pooling water on the floor. I stared, mind reeling. Had he jumped out? But how in that instant? I fumbled for the dome light, illuminating the cab. Nothing. No backpack, no footprints outside in the mud. Just a fading scent of decay, dissipating like smoke. Panic clawed up my throat. I locked the doors again, though it felt futile, and peeled out, tires spinning wild before catching. Miles blurred after that, the storm raging on, my mind a whirlwind of rationalizations. Hallucination from fatigue, maybe, or a trick of the light. But the seat was wet, the water real, cold to the touch. Finally, a roadside motel flickered in the view, its vacancy sign buzzing erratic in the rain. I pulled in, shaking, and stumbled into the office, the bell jingling like a warning. The clerk, a wiry man in his 60s with a tobacco-stained beard, looked up from his newspaper. "Room for one?" I nodded, but words tumbled out. The hitchhiker, the vanishing, the mutters about a flood. His face paled, eyes widening behind smudged glasses. "Sounds like old Elijah," he said, voice dropping to a whisper. "Drowned in the '58 flash flood up near to Nolachucky. Bridge washed out, took a whole family and him hitching a ride. Folks pick him up on stormy nights, but he never stays, always vanishes when the water rises." He slid the key across, avoiding my gaze. "Best forget it, son. Mountains keep they dead close." That was 4 years ago, and I've sworn off night drives in the rain since, sticking to daylight in interstates when I can. But that empty seat haunts me, a void in my rear view that no amount of logic feels. On stormy evenings when the wind howls through the eaves of my new place, I catch whiffs of wet soil and decay, hear mutters in the thunder. And I wonder if Elijah's still out there, thumb extended, waiting for the next fool seeking solace in the quiet. The roads remember they lost after all, and some rides you never truly end. Let me backtrack, because the dread didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slow, like the fog creeping up to hillsides. Leaving Charlotte, the city lights faded quick in my mirrors, replaced by the encroaching dark of rural highways. I'd stopped once for gas at a rundown station. The attendant, an old woman with leathery skin, warning about the weather. "Gone poor cats and dogs," she'd said, eyeing the clouds. "Watch them switchbacks, they bite." I nodded, grabbing a coffee that tasted like burnt grounds, and pressed on, the first drop splattering as I hit the foothills. The loneliness started there, a companion I hadn't invited, whispering doubts about my escape. Was running to the mountains really healing, or just hiding? Emily's voice echoed in my head, her last words, "You always run, don't you?" The rain intensified, wipers struggling, and the fog rolled in, turning in the world monochrome. Spotting a hitchhiker wasn't dramatic. He just appeared, a silhouette in the haze, thumb out steady. I hesitated, caution nagging, but the isolation won. Leaving him felt crueler than the risk. As he settled in, the door thunking shut. That scent hit, not just rain, but something older, like disturbed earth after a grave digging. I tried conversation again. "Name's Mark, what's yours?" Silence, just that pointed finger ahead. The mutters came gradual, building with the storm, words about water rising, cold embracing. Lightning flashes revealed more, clothes outdated, wool coat frayed at the edges, boots caked in mud that smelt of river silt. The swerve was chaos, puddle exploding under the tires, Jeep bucking like a wild thing. Regaining control, the emptiness beside me was a punch to the gut. I searched frantic, the glove box under the seat, but nothing. At the motel, the clerk's tale rooted it deep. Elijah, a drifter, caught in the '58 deluge, body never recovered, spirit restless on rainy roads. Nights now, I drive with the radio blasting, windows cracked, but the scent returns unbidden, the seat seeming colder. I fear today the fog thickens again, and a thumb extends from the shoulder, drawing me back into the unrest. The mountains cradle their secrets, and some hitchhikers never let you go.